Believe it or not, we have a second bridge scandal with Chris Christie now. I almost feel bad picking on the guy now because, I mean, how many forks can you stick in this guy? You had the original George Washington Bridge scandal where they closed down all this traffic for political vendetta. That seemed like it had come close to ending his presidential ambitions. And then we found out that he was giving away 9/11 rubble, like literally, that he got as memorabilia for political allies. How much worse could it get? And then we found out that he was using hurricane and superstorm relief money also for political allies and payback in communities that hadn't even been hit by the superstorm. Oh my God, how much worse could it get? And then we found out that they were doing political benefits for people who donated to them, the Republican Party, Chris Christie, et cetera, and allowing them to manage the pension fund in New Jersey. So those people would put in a couple of $1,000s and then get back a couple of $1 million. How much worse could it get? Well, today we have a second bridge scandal the New York Times writes about. It's actually about the Pulaski Skyway that connects Newark to Jersey City. Now, in 2010, Chris Christie did a tough guy maneuver. So I'm a Republican, man. I'm going to close down projects and I'm not going to raise taxes. I'm going to have plenty of money anyway. So what did he do? He rejected the Hudson River Rail Tunnel, but said, no, I'll take the money anyway. I just won't build it. So that later he could brag about, look at me, I didn't have to raise taxes. Well, you can't just take that money and use it for whatever you want. That's literally against the law. And Chris Christie's like, the law, get out of here. Sure, the Pulaski Skyway, even though it's nowhere near New York City, I will say that it is somehow connected to, well, originally they said the Holland Tunnel, and then the idiots realized because of the law they couldn't use the Holland Tunnel for Port Authority reasons. So then they were like, I meant the Lincoln Tunnel. It's really close to the Lincoln Tunnel. Yeah, it's an access way to the Lincoln Tunnel, even though it's several cities away. Yeah, that's it. That's the ticket. So now, of course, that's illegal. He's being investigated by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office and federal agencies as well, the Securities and Exchange Commission. Now, one of the things we find out about is Mr. Bill Baroni. He was the Deputy Executive Director and Christie's top staff appointee at the Port Authority. And he, of course, resigned during the first bridge scandal. Now, the New York Times says Mr. Baroni wrote that Port Authority lawyers could find absolutely no support for repairing the Skyway. Now, they asked over and over, Chris Christie's team did, is there any way we can use this money for the Skyway? Every time they got the answer back, no. Okay, let me try to be clear. And no, you cannot use it. It's not legal, okay? But I like how there was this quote anyway where they said about Chris Christie how he kept wanting to take the money that he technically couldn't use. He said, if you give the mouse a cookie, he's gonna want a glass of milk. I'm not even quite sure what that means. I think it means, well, you made the mistake of giving him something in the first place, now he wants more, right? So Governor Chris Christie then said, yes, it's part of the Lincoln Tunnel thing, I'm approving it, the money's going, and he does it in a public way, and he says in a press conference, dozens and dozens of lawyers from both sides of the river reviewed that financing plan and approved it, as did the commissioners of the Port Authority. It's like, it wasn't me, it was the lawyers. By the way, it was these same exact lawyers that internally were telling him, no, you cannot do it. The problem is, once he does it publicly, kind of like Dick Cheney pushing for the Iraq War, well, now the bureaucracy has to support him. And this is how politics works. Then what do? They go back in retrospect and fix the memo. Because if they don't do that, they all have to resign at the same time, say the governor is a liar, and ruin their careers, right? Oh, believe me, the political retribution for that would have been enormous at the time. So we find out through the New York Times, by the afternoon of March 25th, after Chris Christie made those public comments, they had removed the language from a memo arguing that the agency lacked the authority to finance the projects. So in retrospect, they're like, yeah, did we say it's illegal? Where's my white hat? I meant legal, sure, fine. Look at these flimsy excuses. If the projects improved access to the Holland Tunnel, the thinking went, then the Lincoln Tunnel would be affected too. Okay, so the Pulaski Skyway is nowhere near the Lincoln Tunnel, but it's arguably somewhat near the Holland Tunnel. So if it connects to a road that connects to a road that connects to the Holland Tunnel, I know the Holland Tunnel is not covered by the Port Authority under these reasons, but Traffic going to the Holland Tunnel affects traffic going to the Lincoln Tunnel. You see that? And it turns out all they needed was to call it, quote, an access infrastructure enhancement. Well, there you go then. Now, I don't do this story to stick another fork in Chris Christie, although he could probably wipe away all these if he just goes and dances on TV again. And then everybody's like, oh, God, that guy's so lovable. It's a fat guy dancing on TV with Jimmy Fallon. He's all right. He's okay, man. What scandals? I don't know what you're talking about. So that is entirely possible, and maybe he makes some sort of unbelievable comeback. But really, the main reason I give you this story is that you understand how politics works. So that these guys who want to get their way, they're like, legal, illegal, whatever. The point is to somehow get the lawyers to take the blame for it. The minute they change that memo and they say, well, we didn't mean illegal, we meant legal because you pressured them and you went out in public and said that they had to go in that direction, well, then they're screwed. So this actually will be the easiest if you ask me. I could be wrong. Look, you got two agencies that are looking at criminal proceedings here against perhaps Chris Christie, perhaps people on his staff. But to me, this is probably going to be the one the easiest to get away with. Because you say, me? It wasn't me. It was the lawyers, like Dick Cheney did with Iraq. Me? Colin Powell's the guy who went to the UN and argued that he had weapons of mass destruction. I don't know what you're talking about. Me? I didn't say do the torture. I just pressured the lawyers until they said you could do the torture. Wasn't me, right? This is how they cover their ass. Now, in this case, we don't know if it's going to work yet, but we do know that Chris Christie did these type of things over and over again. Imagine if this guy had access to the power of the White House. The bridges he would build and not build, and the political allies that would get an unbelievable steady stream of money from his administration. The one bridge that Chris Christie can really build is the bridge to his donors. That's what a lot of this is about.